Good day, everyone. We're starting chapter 4, and we're going to start off with paragraph 22. I just wanted to start off by mentioning that if you had any questions or comments or whatnot, please feel free to email me and I will answer them in future sessions. So I'm just going to get started with paragraph 22. This leads us to turn our attention from the object of perception to the subject of perception. I perceive not only things, but also myself. The percept of myself contains, to begin with, the fact that I am the stable element in contrast to the continual coming and going of the percept pictures. The percept of my eye can always come up in my consciousness while I am having other percepts. When I am absorbed in the perception of a given object, I am for the time being aware only of this object. To this, the percept of myself can be added. I am then conscious not only of the object, but also of my own personality, which confronts the object and observes it. I do not merely see a tree, but I also know that it is I who am seeing it. I know, moreover, that something happens in me while I am observing the tree. When the tree disappears from my field of vision, an after effect of this process remains in my consciousness, a picture of the tree. This picture has become associated with myself during my observation. Myself has become enriched. Its content has absorbed a new element. This element I call my mental picture of the tree. I should never have occasion to speak of mental pictures did I not experience them in the percept of my own self. Percepts would come and go. I should let them slip by. Only because I perceive myself and observe that with each percept the content of myself too is changed. Am I compelled to connect the observation of the object with the changes in my own condition and to speak of my mental picture? And we have as a summary, I perceive myself along with perceiving objects, and myself is enriched with and by a new element, which is a mental picture of the object. I connect the observation of the object with this change of state in the self. So here Steiner is beginning to talk about the concept of mental picture, and that is very important to get in your mind what is a mental picture. And a mental picture is, as he states here, what remains in your consciousness after you've perceived the object. And that is what is important in that paragraph. What was the other main point? I think the summary was sufficient in its explanation. I perceive myself along with perceiving objects, and myself is enriched with and by a new element, which is the mental picture. Okay, I think that is sufficient explanation of this paragraph. These next paragraphs in this chapter get pretty long. Like 23 is really long, so I hope I can at least read it in this session. So I'm going to move on to 23. I perceive the mental picture in myself in the same sense as I perceive color, sound, etc. in other objects. I am now also able to distinguish these other objects that confront me by calling them the outer world, whereas the content of my percept of myself I call my inner world. The failure to recognize the true relationship between mental picture and object has led to the greatest misunderstandings in modern philosophy. The perception of a change in me, the modification myself undergoes, has been thrust into the foreground, while the object which causes this modification is lost sight of altogether. It has been said that what we perceive not objects, but only our mental pictures. I know, so it is said, nothing of the table in itself, which is the object of my observation, but only of the change which occurs within me while I am perceiving the table. This view should not be confused with the Berkeleyan theory mentioned above. Berkeley maintains the subjective nature of the content of my percepts, but he does not say that my knowledge is limited to my mental pictures. He limits my knowledge to my mental pictures because, in his opinion, there are no objects apart from mental picturing. What I take to be a table no longer exists, according to Berkeley, when I cease to look at it. This is why Berkeley holds that my percepts arise directly through the omnipotence of God. I see a table because God calls up this percept in me. For Berkeley, therefore, there are no real beings other than God and human spirits. What we call the world exists only in these spirits. What the naive man calls the outer world, or corporeal nature, is for Berkeley non-existent. This theory is confronted by the now predominant Kantian view, which limits our knowledge of the world to our mental pictures, not because it is convinced that things cannot exist beyond these mental pictures, but because it believes us to be so organized that we can experience only the changes of our own selves, but not the things in themselves that cause these changes. This view concludes from the fact that I know only my mental pictures, not that there is no reality independent of them, but only that the subject cannot directly assimilate such reality. The subject can merely, through the medium of its subjective thoughts, imagine it, invent it, think it, cognize it, or perhaps even fail to cognize it. This Kantian conception believes it gives expression to something absolutely certain, something which is immediately evident, requiring no proof. And this is the quote. The first fundamental proposition which the philosopher must bring to clear consciousness is the recognition that our knowledge, to begin with, is limited to our mental pictures. Our mental pictures are the only things that we know directly, experience directly, and just because we have direct experience of them, even the most radical doubt cannot rob us of our knowledge of them. On the other hand, the knowledge which goes beyond my mental pictures, taking mental pictures here in the widest possible sense, so as to include all psychical processes, is not proof against doubt. Hence, at the very beginning of all philosophizing, we must explicitly set down all knowledge which goes beyond mental pictures as being open to doubt. These are the opening sentences of Volket's book on Immanuel Kant's theory of knowledge. What is here put forward as an immediate and self-evident truth is in reality the result of a thought operation which runs as follows. The naive man believes that things, just as we perceive them, exist also outside our consciousness. Physics, physiology, and psychology, however, seem to teach us that for our percepts, our organization is necessary, and that therefore we cannot know anything about external objects except what our organization transmits to us. Our percepts are thus modifications of our organization, not things in themselves. This train of thought has in fact been characterized by Edwin von Hartmann as the one which must lead to the conviction that we can have direct knowledge only of our mental pictures, because outside our organism we find vibrations of physical bodies and of the air which are perceived by us as sound. It is concluded that what we call sound is nothing more than a subjective reaction of our organism to these motions in the external world. Similarly, it is concluded that color and warmth are merely modifications of our organism. And further, these two kinds of percepts are held to be produced in us through processes in the external world which are utterly different from what we experience as warmth or as color. When these processes stimulate the nerves in my skin, I have the subjective percept of warmth. When they stimulate the optic nerve, I perceive light and color. Light, color, and warmth, then, are the responses of my sensory nerves to external stimuli. Even the sense of touch reveals to me not the objects of the outer world, but only states of my own body. In the sense of modern physics, one could somehow think that bodies consist of infinitely small particles called molecules, and that these molecules are not in direct contact, but are at certain distances from one another. Between them, therefore, is empty space. Across this space they act on one another by forces of attraction and repulsion. If I put my hand on a body, the molecules on my hand by no means touch those of the body directly, but there remains a certain distance between body and hand, and what I experience as the body's resistance to nothing but the effect of the force of repulsion which its molecules exert on my hand. I am absolutely external to the body, and perceive only its effects on my organism.